So call this number now. DMX. Someday all music will sound this good.
This is CNN.
Live from Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, John Sununu. Tonight, the environmental vice president in the Crossfire. Democratic Senator Tim Wirth of Colorado, member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and Republican Representative Robert Walker of Pennsylvania, Chief Deputy Whip.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. Is Al Gore a green meanie? Republicans are attacking the Democratic vice presidential nominee as an environmental extremist. Today, White House press spokesman Marlin Finswater called Gore, quote, Mr. Sellout America. Referring to the recent Earth Summit, which both Gore and President Bush attended, Finswater said of Gore, quote, he tries to talk about economic growth when he spent a week in Rio saying, to heck with the economy, sell it out to the environmentalists. To which Gore's running mate Bill Clinton replied today,
Al Gore tried to have America lead the world again in Rio. He didn't want America humiliated as it was under George Bush's leadership, or lack of leadership.
The environment will be a big issue this fall. Gore is the author of a best-selling book on the subject. Bush, 4 years ago, promised to be the environmental president. Clinton's environmental record in Arkansas is mixed. Dan Quayle is the environmentalist nemesis in the administration. That's the cast of characters. Over to you, John.
Senator Wirth, there's no way Governor Clinton supports all of Al Gore's extreme environmental positions, is there?
Well, what extreme environmental positions are you talking about,
tax,
John? Wait a minute.
tax on gasoline. You asked me which ones, I'm going to tell you.
I'm just telling you, did Al Gore propose a carbon tax? No. Martin Feldstein in your party was President Reagan's chief economic advisor, is proposing a carbon tax. Gore said in his book, this is one of the options that has to be looked at, and you know and I know that we got to think about pricing on energy to be realistic about what's going on. So and your own, I see Martin Feldstein, let me see, wasn't he a Republican in the Reagan administration? Reagan's chief economic advisor?
He wants to propose something.
He's absolutely right in thinking about the fact that we got to be realistic about costing, and we've got to be realistic about environmental costs and start looking at long-term investments, not the nonsense of this administration.
So he wants to propose a carbon tax to get the benefit from the environmentalist and then deny that he ever proposed it.
He's not proposing environment. He's not proposing it. You ought to read his book. It would be good for you. You know, it'd be a very healthy thing for you to do.
It's one of the strongest things he supports in the book, Senator.
The options that have to be looked at are overall all of the pricing options. There's no question about the fact that that has to happen.
So your mission here tonight is to deny Al Gore's support for a carbon tax.
No, my mission tonight is to talk about somebody who is looking for change, looking for the future, and who wants to lead the nation in a direction that won't be embarrassing to us around the world as the president, your president, the guy that you work for, and who said, John, even you were too extreme for Ronald Reagan in this, for George Bush in this deal, right? Who is embarrassing to us every place around the world. You watch that press. I think I was the only one of the four of us who was there. It was remarkable. It was remarkable in Rio. Remarkable to see the U.S. and have the whole 154 nations asking the United States to lead, and we ducked that responsibility just when we had this tremendous opportunity. Wow. We can do a lot better than that, and that's what the Clinton-Gore ticket's all about.
Leadership is being willing to stand for a strong environmental policy without following the extreme. You've got you have a cafe position that's not as extreme as Al Gore's position.
My cafe position, Al Gore's position, I think are absolutely identical. I don't think they're very much.
You both want to go to 45 miles.
We ought to explain.
We ought to do cafe as fuel efficiency for automobiles. You were, I think, once an advisor on the board of General Motors.
No,
and once said, well, you told me once in the White House that cafe standards and not fuel efficiency hadn't done us any good.
No.
Fuel efficiency standards for automobiles is one of the most important things in the world to do.
If you're going to make statements, make them accurate. Cafe standard.
Well, you are just repeating what you said to me early on.
The cafe standard that is being proposed is to move from 27.5 miles per gallon as a requirement to 45 miles per gallon as a requirement, at a cost of millions of American jobs.
Who said millions of American jobs? It's the same argument that Detroit made back when we had the first fuel economy crisis. We had 12.5 miles to the gallon for each automobile. Detroit said, you make any changes, there's no way in the world we can survive this. We went from 12.5 to 27, was one of the only things that has been effective in terms of major changes and consumption patterns of energy. One of the few things that we've been able to do.
You want to double that
so now what we can do is to go as high.
The producers are ordering me to get off of this cafe. We don't want to sound like we're sitting around drinking coffee.
Corporate average fuel.
But one thing that has to be pointed out is that the Brookings Institute and Harvard did a joint study here recently that estimated that between 2,000 and 4,000 people a year in this country lose their lives as a result of the CAFE standard that went to 27.5. So in fact, we are killing real people with what we have already done, and further increases in that would kill even more people. It's environment over people.
Bob Walker, George Bush ran in 1988 as the environmental president. Has he decided this time to run as the anti-environmental president?
No, not at all.
Is that a better strategy?
No, because his record is actually better than Al Gore's in this.
Bob.
Go ahead.
Let him make his soundbite. Let him make his soundbite.
Let's get this one out there, right?
Name me one major piece of environmental legislation that Al Gore has sponsored and gotten through the Congress. I can't name you one. I don't think there are any. George Bush has gotten the Clean Air Act passed. It took 12 years to get a Clean Air bill passed. George Bush came in and got it done. So that's something that he actually did for the environment.
Better political record than Al Gore.
That's better than Al Gore has on the environment.
George Bush wouldn't have gotten anywhere on clean air had it not been for a group of us focused on the issue of changing the whole strategy and breaking the logjam by talking about economic incentives and the way in which you do this. Now, George Bush says to the world, we've got this Clean Air Act. By the way, Dan Quayle, come over here and gut it. Wipe out all the enforcement mechanisms. You and the Competitiveness Council were not really serious about this. Make the black hole a place for, make the White House a place for special interests to come in.
That's what's going on. That's what's going on. Your nose ought to be growing.
That's what's happening. What do you think
I'm trying to make here is that at least George Bush has the Clean Air Act to point to. What does Al Gore have to point to?
Al Gore has an extraordinarily distinguished record.
Name me one major bill that has
I'll start with the energy bill that's in front of the Congress right now.
Senate. George Bush is the President of the United States. He deigned to sign a Clean Air Act, and then as Tim says...
he proposed the Clean Air Act to pass.
It's his bill.
Let me ask you about the Clean Air Act then. George Bush complains, you complain, John Sununu complains that environmentalism costs jobs. Now, that happens to be true sometimes. There is a trade-off. Didn't the Clean Air Act cost jobs?
Well, there are some jobs cost in the Clean Air Act, but the fact is that we tried to make the responsible trade-offs. What we don't see in the Al Gore position is those responsible kind of trade-offs. In fact, Al Gore in his book consistently, as an analogy in his book, refers to people who want technological progress as Nazis.
Oh, that is ridiculous.
That's just preposterous. Now, wait, that is preposterous.
Check page 275 in the book. Go to page 275 in the book. He admits to that analogy.
You're saying technological progress is akin to Nazism? Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what Al Gore says in his book.
Remember the Science Committee in the House? You know better than that.
I'm not suggesting that. Al Gore suggests that.
Right? You have a good scientific background. You ought to know the preposterous nature of this sort of thing.
You know what? I haven't read page 275 of Al Gore's book. I will buy you lunch. I will give you $100. I don't know what I will do if there's any serious claim
you want me to
that
quote?
On that page, Al Gore says that people who favor technological progress are Nazis.
You want me to quote?
This is Marlon Fitzwater, Republican National Committee.
He has a metaphor throughout the book that he says that he believes that technological progress are as evil and as dangerous as to society's Nazis. And I quote, "It is not merely in the service of the analogy that I referred so often to the struggles against Nazi and communism, communist totalitarianism, because I believe that the emerging effort to save the environment is a continuation of those struggles." In other words, if you don't agree with us, you're Nazis.
Oh, that is ridiculous.
That's ridiculous, right? You know better. Oh, that tautology does not work in any way. That is just preposterous.
I'm quoting directly from the book. That's the reason why we say he's an extremist.
Let's go back. Let's start from let's start with where we are. What was the first choice that George Bush made? The first decision that George Bush made was to name Dan Quayle, which has been wrapped around his neck and been embarrassing him for 4 years. The first choice that Bill Clinton made was to name Al Gore, which has been one of the most exciting things catalyzing the country and thinking about the kind of change that this country has to have. Gore's not an extremist.
You guys are talking about positions. You
guys say extremist over and over and over again because you don't have anything substantive to talk about.
Filibuster in the Senate, but don't filibuster here.
You're here. Filibuster is saying extremist.
You're trying to run away from the carbon tax.
Not running away from a carbon tax.
Run away from
the options that ought to be looked at.
Every time you mention specific, you say
I didn't run away from any of those items. Al Gore's positions on CAFE is exactly the same as mine.
We'll give you a chance to filibuster when we come back and when we return.
Extremist is a filibuster.
And when we return after that filibuster, we'll ask our guests why the labor unions are scared stiff of the Clinton-Gore environmental agenda.
Late one night in 1953, in a darkened GE laboratory, a remarkable breakthrough occurred. An experiment in liquid polymers took an unexpected turn. Dan Fox, the young scientist who found it the next morning, had no idea what he'd created. But it was crystal clear and incredibly strong, even under the most extreme conditions. It was Lexan, the first of GE's engineered plastics. Plastics that would soon make it possible for architects to express themselves more brilliantly. It would make a car designer's best ideas even better, and help doctors in their life-saving work. Because what Dan Fox had discovered was something we at GE have always believed. You never know where the next great idea will come from, or how far it will take you.
Now there are cars and trucks that run on clean-burning natural gas.
Yeah, but how clean can it be?
Natural gas reduces the emissions that cause smog by 80%.
Yeah, but what does it cost?
It's like saving 40 cents a gallon on gasoline.
Yeah, but where does it come from?
Natural gas comes from right here in North America.
Yeah, but who makes the vehicles?
America's automakers are turning out fleets of natural gas cars and trucks.
Yeah, but do they come with tinted windows?
Tonight, TNT presents 3 kings of Tinseltown and the king of talk. Kirk Douglas, Anthony Quinn, and Jack Lemmon. The Larry King TNT Extra. Tonight at 8 Eastern on TNT.
Welcome back to Crossfire. We're talking about Governor Clinton, Senator Gore, the environment and jobs. Our guests are Congressman Robert Walker, Chief Republican Deputy Whip, and Senator Tim Wirth of Colorado, a member of the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources and a good friend of Al Gore's. Senator, on the cafe issue, important issue politically, important issue in terms of what you do for the environment or let the environment do for or to America. The United Auto Workers went up and testified strongly against the CAFE proposals, saying that it would cost American jobs. They're scared to death of that kind of a proposal costing us our...
Well, the UAW said the same thing in 1975, 76, 77, when we had the major energy crisis and all of the changes then. I don't think we base a policy on what one sort of union group is going to say. What we ought to be basing a policy on is the fact that we're in a very dangerous situation in the United States. 50% of our oil is imported, massive hemorrhaging of U.S. capital going overseas. We got to stop that. One of the ways in which we do that is to use fuel much more efficiently in our automobiles. So there's no question about it.
You're saying then if the Democratic Party then has to make a choice between a constituency that cares about the environment or a constituency that cares about labor jobs, you're leaning towards picking the environment.
And you're setting up again this false choice between jobs and the environment. It is not the case. If we are backing out oil, which we ought to be doing, under this administration, almost nothing has been done, for example, to stop this vast outflow of capital out of the United States because we're importing so much
Walker,
oil.
I'm about to offer you another
we ought to
free
make
lunch.
This kind of change.
I will buy you lunch if the United Auto Workers endorse George Bush for president because they're so scared stiff of Bill Clinton and Al Gore. Do you expect that for a minute?
I don't expect
so all
that,
this is just talk.
No, it's not just talk, because the United Auto Workers do look at the facts. And the fact is that because of CAFE, we dropped a significant portion of market share in this country because the way in which manufacturers went to smaller cars was to basically import them.
You know, this is what I don't understand. Why isn't it defeatist to say, gosh, it would be nice to have more efficient cars, but American companies just can't do it, and Japanese companies will do it, and therefore we better not even try.
All I'm saying to you is that the experience that we have since 1977 is a loss of market share as manufacturers
Whose fault
reach
is
out.
that? That's the fault of these auto companies.
Well, but the UAW in this country works for those auto companies.
Bob,
the fact is that we lost jobs as a result of all of that.
Don't the Japanese have to meet exactly the same fuel economy standards as we do?
And their production,
don't the Germans have to meet the same
Their production lines are designed to build small cars. Our production lines aren't.
That's 20 years ago we made these changes. You said Detroit can't
all I'm saying is we lost major market share, and the UAW has paid the price on that.
So
they probably will not endorse George Bush. They probably will not endorse George Bush, but they perhaps ought to take a look at those facts and understand why they are now out of
jobs. They're obviously not as
jobs.
scared as John Sununu claims they are, or they would endorse George Bush, which of course they're not going to do, as you acknowledge.
No, they probably,
of the policy.
Yeah, they're scared of the policy, sure.
Al Gore, one of Al Gore's serious points is precisely concerns American market share in major industries. He says that the world is turning towards green industry. That was one of the messages down at Rio. All these other countries, Germany, Japan, our rivals, are turning to it, and we're going to lose market share in a lot of these industries if we don't adapt and stay ahead of the game instead of falling behind. Now, I thought that was a good point.
Well, sure, it's a good point, and I think we have some companies that are moving into that. We spend more in this country than any other country on environmental, and as a result, we have a large environmental industry in this country. We ought to exploit that. But there's another thing that we ought to look at, and that is we need technology of other kinds we need to be world competitive in, and some of the suggestions in Al Gore's book that suggest, for instance, that every one of those new technologies ought to be cleared through some bureaucracy before it could come online would be absolutely devastating to our ability to compete in the world. And yet he suggests that over and over again in the book.
Who's clearing that you clear a technology through some bureaucracy?
That's exactly
preposterous.
No, that's exactly what he suggests in the book. Haven't you read the book, Tim?
I've read the book. Let's go back to the whole business of air pollution technologies in the United States. We have been the leaders for 20 years in air pollution technology. Unhappily today, under this administration, we have lost even a market share in our own air pollution technology. 70% of the air pollution technology used in the United States is imported from overseas. What Al wants to do, and he has been on the edge of this set of issues for a long time, is to change this pattern and really start
at the top of the ticket
where we're
on
going.
the other side. In his state of
air
Arkansas,
pollution control technologies,
Clinton is 47th. His state is 47th in terms of the emission of toxic air going into the environment, into the air. He's 47th in terms of toxic emissions to the rivers. He's way down at the bottom in terms of the purity of their drinking water.
And we do have world competitive industry.
Are you going to have the first debate between Clinton and Gore?
No, I want to ask Bob Walker about this business, because it does seem to me that you're pursuing what I would call a three bears strategy. Clinton's porridge is too cold, Gore's porridge is too hot, George Bush, baby bear's porridge is just right.
That's
Isn't that
exactly
sort of
right.
a hard sell?
No, it's not a hard sell, because one of the things that you have to have in this business is some balance. You have to do what is necessary in order to move forward on an environmental agenda, but you can't do so and cost Americans jobs and cost Americans more money than they can afford.
What exactly do you want Americans to be afraid of? You want them to be afraid a Clinton administration is going to be too green, or do you want them to be afraid that it's not green enough?
No, I do know that Al Gore, for instance,
which is it?
I do know that Al Gore suggested to journalists at one point that they ought to make certain that they don't bring anything out which is not alarmist. You know, the point is that
they don't bring what?
He suggested to journalists that they practice self-censorship.
It's printed in the New Republic.
That's right. It's in the New Republic.
You guys are reaching out for all these allegations and discussions. Where are we?
Are we supposed to be afraid that the Clinton administration is going to be too environmentally extreme or too environmentally negligent? It can't be both.
Sure it can. In the wrong places at the wrong time. You guys have extreme policies in certain areas and be lax in other areas.
You guys are in the same old Republican routine. You're going to say one thing, extreme, 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 right? And that's all you say without any policy coming from this administration. Wetlands is going down the shop. You've got one piece after another of this kind of rhetorical approach without any substance. Where is the Bush administration on any kind of environmental
position that Al Gore has proposed as being merely a suggestion that he's not serious about?
No, he's laying out a variety of options and saying this is where we ought to go.
Let's take a break before we do that. Excuse me, gentlemen, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about who's selling out America.
Hello, I'm Susan Rook. At the top of the hour, the latest in the standoff between UN inspectors in Iraq. Tension and threats of violence increase. Colombia's most notorious drug lord leads a prison revolt and has apparently escaped. And more rough seas for the Navy in the wake of the latest sex scandal. Prime News, right after Crossfire.
What's most important to you?
My wife. We've been married for 31 years.
32. Definitely these guys. What's most important? Jack, of course.
My granddaughter, Susan. The new Ford Crown Victoria now offers anti-lock brakes with traction assist and dual airbags. Because shouldn't your car know what's important to you?
Have you driven a Ford lately? It was such a pain coming home to a dark house. Always feeling too hot or too cold. So we had Honeywell redo everything. Now the temperature's always comfortable. The lighting's taken care of, and we feel a lot safer. Even the air is cleaner. It's like living in a new house.
Honeywell, helping you control your world. We've seen some incredible changes take place in the last couple years. Changes that will affect our families, our jobs, even our whole planet. In fact, the prospects for a better world are as good today as they've ever been. Strength and resolve have kept us free during the most troubling moments of this century and can keep us free into the next. And in this uncertain world, it's important to remember the real peace dividend is peace.
I try to ignore my sensitive teeth, but hot and cold foods hurt.
Don't ignore your sensitive teeth. They can be more serious than you think. Pain from one sensitive tooth can start the domino effect, make you stop brushing, lead to gingivitis, periodontal disease, even tooth loss. Dentists recommend Sensodyne most for sensitive teeth.
My dentist was right. Now my teeth don't feel sensitive.
Don't ignore sensitive teeth. Sensodyne helps stop the pain and the domino effect.
Bob Walker, this rhetoric from Marlin Fitzwater today about Al Gore selling out America, you know, that really, I resent that, and it depresses me. Al Gore wants what he thinks is best for America. George Bush wants what he thinks is best for America. They disagree. Why can't you Republicans make your political arguments without accusing the other side of being unpatriotic all the time like you did in 1988?
Well, I think that both want what's good for the United States. I think what the American people have to do is decide what's good for the United States. In the case of the Rio conference, the fact was that what the rest of the world wanted to do was have the United States pay for their environmental cleanup. And that was going to cost us massive amounts of money that in all honesty, I don't think we can afford. And the President was right in standing up for our idea that the rest of the world ought to engage in environmental cleanup on their own and not expect us to pay for it.
You know, Helmut Kohl, the conservative premier of Germany, John Major, of another conservative from Britain, every major leader in the world felt that this treaty that George Bush refused to sign was a good thing for the world. Now, can George Bush be the only sane man in the world?
No, they all saw us being weakened by it, and that helps them economically and trade. Absolutely, that was the case.
Why would we be weakened if they weren't weakened?
Let me make one point here. It seems to me that the real voodoo economics in this campaign is Al Gore suggesting that you can adopt all his environmental extremist positions and do so without any cost in jobs and money. I mean, that just is not tenable.
Let me ask about Senator Gore's commitment to the environmental issues. He says it's the most important issue, yet he's refused every opportunity to serve on the Senate committee you serve on that deals with those environmental issues. What's he afraid of going on that committee for?
Oh, I mean, there are a whole series of issues. There's an environment issue, there's an energy issue, there's a commerce committee issue.
But he says the environment is the most important issue.
The Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over a lot of things. John, you know the complicated nature of this. I mean, that's a silly argument to make, it seems to me. I mean, Al has
refused to join you on that committee all along?
to join. He's a member of the Commerce Committee and has done a superb job in terms of all of the relationships, related to space. No one is not offered positions in the Senate on various committees. You choose what you're going to do. And Al Gore has been not only a leader on the environment on the Commerce Committee, but a very, very outspoken and strong advocate for arms control and very creative initiatives as a member of the Armed Services Committee. So there's the combination of all of these things. Now, this set of issues, this set of environmental issues is in front of the American public. The American public knows, particularly the younger Americans, how very serious this is for the 21st century. I think that the issue in this campaign is going to be, do they want to change from a know-nothing, do-nothing, I think deliberately ignorant administration on many of these fronts, who are posing these false choices of jobs in the environment, or are we going to move ahead in a constructive and balanced fashion, as we Democrats have proposed? Nobody would suggest, I don't think, that Dan Quayle is going to be any kind of a substitute for the wonderful and thoughtful leadership that we have.
What environmental legislation has Al Gore sponsored and gotten through the Senate?
Oh, Al Gore has done a whole series of things related to science from the position of that committee.
Name one environmental major development.
All of the initiatives coming out of the Defense Department related to the adjustment of defense expenditures to focus on the use of, those are two that we have worked on together only in the last couple of weeks. Third, significant initiatives related to the
I got to cut you off. He's done too many things to get into here. Thank you, Tim Wirth. Thank you, Bob Walker. Mean Green, John Sununu, and I will be back in just a moment.
He was 50 when it happened. In 3 months, he went from perfect vision to almost total blindness.
You know, You never appreciate the beauty in your life until you can't see it anymore. My wife, my family, my life. Everything I cared about just turned to darkness. And no one could tell me why.
In test after test, doctors were at a loss.
I can't find a thing.
There seemed to be no answers. Finally, a test was done using GE's revolutionary magnetic resonance imager. It lets doctors see things that ordinary tests and x-rays can't. Look at this. Incredible. The doctors discovered a tumor affecting his optic nerves, and he was treated. Within days, he got his vision back.
Hey, how about a smile?
And everything that came with it.
Pleasant trip, Mr. Conklin. Your room's ready. Full kitchen. Comfy living room with fireplace. It's heaven. We think so. After all, you'll be staying with us for quite a while.
Tell me, do all business travelers come here?
Oh, no. I'm afraid some are sent to other hotel rooms.
Residence Inn by Marriott, the extended stay hotel.
Tonight, meet Vice President Dan Quayle for a full hour on Larry King Live, and he'll be taking your phone calls. Dan Quayle tonight, Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
For a transcript, send $4 to Crossfire Transcripts, Journal Graphics Incorporated, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203, or call 303-831-9000.
Michael, it's amazing. You go through 3 days of trashing of the President of the United States at the Democratic Convention without saying a word about it, and Marlon Fitzwater makes one nasty comment about Al Gore, and you look so offended.
I'm not offended at his criticism of Al Gore. I'm offended at his challenging Al Gore's patriotism because Al Gore wants to be a strong environmentalist. That's exactly what you guys did in 1980.
They were challenging the president as a traitor to the world because of his
They were criticizing George Bush. They were not criticizing America. That's what Marlon Fitzwater said.
Marlon criticized Al Gore for his position.
That's not the case.
That's exactly what it was. It was criticism of Al Gore.
Crossfire.
And from the right, I'm John Sununu. Join us again tomorrow night for another edition of Crossfire.
Prime News is next, and here's biodegradable Bernard Shaw to recycle a few headlines for us. Bernie?
Thank you, Michael. Coming up, the heat gets too intense for an inspection team in Baghdad, deepening the confrontation between Iraq and the United Nations. Also, is Ross Perot still in the running? Some state election officials are scratching their heads. And Popeye will need his spinach at a dust-up with the comics distributor. Prime News is next.
Coming up, Prime News, followed by Larry King Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
When we opened Reichardt's clothing store in 1952, I chose the Southwick clothing line for men at that time because of its unique classic style featuring the natural shoulder. We've had no style change in our 40 years of business. Through the years, I've seen the clothing industry go through many trends. The secret we found at Reichardt's years ago that many of the best dressed men in the world know, it's not necessary to change style to stay in style. So when you consider the consistency of style, the finest fabrics made by the best American craftsmen that will give our clothing years and years of comfort and wear, these reasons could very well make the cost per wear of our Southwick suits and sport coats the lowest cost of any quality clothing in America. That's our story here at Reichardt's, and we're going to stick to it, and our customers know it. This philosophy of clothing investment has made Reichardt's a unique clothing store. So please come see for yourself. You'll be satisfied for a long time when you shop here, and I'll see to it, because I'm here. I'm Bill Reichart, and I own the store.
Working to be number one.
Carrying a large inventory of exciting new Geos is one way we work to be number one. After you test drive a Carl Geo and compare it against Honda, Toyota, Isuzu, you'll see there's no comparison. And when you buy that Geo from Carl, you'll experience all the other ways we're working to be number one by keeping you number one. Carl Chevrolet Geo.
Ankeny, exit 90 off I-35.
Presenting Digital Music Express.